welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl. Today we're doing my July audiobook wrap up. Just in case you missed it, I posted my July reading wrap up yesterday, which is all the physical books that I read for July. I'll link that up here in the cards. You can click that little I if you missed it, or check down below in the description. So I had a total of 11 audiobooks for July. I did finish one or two of them in the very early first few days of August, but I read the majority of them in July, so I wanted to include them in here since they're kind of fresh in my brain. But I had a great audiobook month because we did Mermaid Marathon Readathon, which again, I'll link that vlog up here if you want to watch that, where I read a lot of mermaid books for a week. And then we did the Reading Rush / Booktubeathon, which again, vlog will be up here, that again we did for a week, and so I managed to read a lot of audiobooks. A lot of these were shorter, so that's how I was able to read so many, and then I just listen while I work and clean and cook and just do everything. So I'll be having more videos about how I listen to so many audiobooks soon, so just stay tuned. But for now, we're going to talk about the ones that I did for Mermaid Marathon. So the very first audiobook I listened to was Mermaids Singing by Lisa Carey. This was narrated by Jan Maxwell. This was a very short, about 3-hour mermaid audiobook. This is an adult book. I was hoping that we were going to have some more magically mermaid things and not just mermaid metaphors, or I don't know how to explain it. This was basically a contemporary book with like loosely mentioned mermaids or like comparisons to mermaids, but there weren't actually like mermaids in here. It was just kind of like a metaphor for the book, which is kind of what I thought it was going to be. And overall, it was just very depressing. The narrator was okay. I just found it very depressing and very hard to get through for being only 3 hours. I listened at 1.6 speed, which means I got through this in about an hour and 45 minutes, and it felt like it took forever. This one definitely has some sexual themes in here, some abuse themes. I just didn't really like it at all. And this is probably why it's not popular and why no one talks about it, but I want to read all books with mermaids in the title, and this has been one on my brain for a little bit, so I'm glad that I finished it, but I wound up giving this one 2 stars. Next, I listened to Emily Winsnap and the Castle and the Mist. This is book 3 in the Emily Winsnap series by Liz Kessler. This one was narrated by Finty Williams. So I think she narrates all of these books. This is a middle grade series about a girl who discovers that she is a mermaid, and there's so much adventure and so much fun in here. It definitely is a solid middle grade, slightly younger feeling book series. That doesn't bother me at all. I just knew what to expect. I just really enjoyed it. I think Finty Williams' narration is one of my favorites. She has an English accent and she just does such a great job, and she does such a cute voices for all the characters. These are very short audiobooks. I'm having so much fun listening to them. They all have a different adventure in each story. They have a lot about mermaid school and learning to do mermaid things and mermaid history, and then there's mermaid gods and all kinds of fun stuff. So I love this one just as much as the other two, so I gave it 4 stars. Next one I listened to was Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant. This one was narrated by Teri Schaunelbet. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it'll be down here for you guys. This is a 3-hour prequel to Into the Drowning Deep, which I read last year for Booktubeathon and remains one of the scariest books I've ever read, but I'm kind of a wuss. But this is about a company called Imagine Co, and what they do is they make mockumentaries of famous legends like Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, and they make them seem really real, kind of like, I don't know, Discovery Channel or something like that. And so they decided to do one about mermaids, and they go to the Mariana Trench, which is supposed to be the deepest part of the ocean, to film it, and something terrible happens, and they find out that mermaids might not be so mythical. And it's just amazing. Into the Drowning Deep is one of my favorite books of all time. These are adult books, but this one in particular is fairly appropriate for a young adult. The Into the Drowning Deep maybe not so much, but pretty close. I'm really glad actually that I read Into the Drowning Deep first, even though this one came out first, just because this one's such a short book. I think it was originally a short series that she wrote for a contest or a magazine or something, and so it's very short and abrupt, and you don't really get any questions answered. You don't get a ton of questions answered in Into the Drowning Deep, but it's definitely a much longer, it's like over 400-page book, very thorough, and you get a lot more attached to the characters, and there's just a lot more intensity. So personally, I still think you should read Into the Drowning Deep first, and then if you love that, read this one, because it's kind of fun to get a prequel on what happened, because they're both set on different ships in different situation. So I really liked it. It's very scientific, but I think in a really fun way. It's definitely spooky and scary, but also very fun. It's very diverse. There's a lot of different types of characters and types of people that go on the voyage as well. It's set mostly at sea, and I really enjoyed it. Only a 3.5-hour audiobook, and I thought our narrator did a pretty good job as well. So I wound up giving this one 4 stars. Next up, I listened to Lies Beneath by Anne Greenwood Brown, narrated by Macleod Andrews. Hopefully that's how you pronounce it. So I read this one originally last year, so I re-listened to this one via audiobook, and I really liked it a lot more the second time. This one is about mermaids. Again, these are special mermaids that can go in any type of water. Basically, if they get in water, they can transform. I think at their own discretion. I'm not sure. But this is mostly focused on our lead character. I'm getting my mermaids mixed up. I think it's Calder and his sisters. And basically, his mom had a romance with a human, and he did something to her. And so she basically said that she was going to come after his kids at some point and fulfill a promise that he made. And so their mom died, and they decided to go after this guy's kids and to fulfill the promise that their mom made. So it's really interesting in that aspect. It's set mostly at Lake Michigan, I think, and so they're going after this guy's kids, which are now like in their 40s and have their own sets of kids, and so they're using his kids to get close to him to basically try and kill him. It's set on, like I said, like I think on Lake Michigan, and so you get like kind of that islandy lake type feel, which I really liked. I really enjoyed listening to it on audiobook. Calder's kind of an unlikable character, which kind of bugged me the first time around, but I really enjoyed it, and this one has an excellent ending, which is what made me reread it in the first place. The last like 50 pages of what happens in this book are enough to make you want to keep reading. So unfortunately I can't find the other ones on audiobooks, but I do own them physically, so I do plan on reading them here pretty soon for, I think I'm doing the catch-up-a-thon. Really enjoyed it and wound up giving this one 4 stars the second time around. So that was all that I read for Mermaid Marathon, and then we're gonna go into the books I read in between Mermaid Marathon and the Reading Rush. So, you guys, I finally finished the story of mankind. Let me explain something to you. I decided to do this whole Newbery Award challenge, and the Newbery Awards is a award of excellence in literature for writing for middle grade books, for juvenile books, something like that, kids books. And I have always wanted to read all of the Newbery Awards because I really enjoyed all of the ones that I read in my childhood and even in my adult years. And so I was like, I'm determined to do this, and I'm going to start from the bottom, which is 1921. Almost 100 years ago. And so I made a video on it. I'll put it up here again in the cards if you guys want to click and watch my Newbery Award announcement video where I talk about the ones I've already read and the ones I'm going to start with. So this is the first book. And I got this book and I was going to physically read it, and it's over 800 pages. It doesn't look like it because this is not the newer version, but the audiobook is, I think, almost 20 hours. And I was like, oh my god, because all of the other Newbery Award books are like 150 pages and like 4-hour audiobook max. And I was just like, I'm gonna fly through these. And it took me months to finish this one because it was so dull. And okay, I know it's 100 years old. That's fine. I've read books that are really old, but this is definitely more of like a non-fiction book. It literally is the story of mankind. So this one is by Henrik Willem van Loon. I do not know how to pronounce the narrator's name, but again, she'll be listed right here below. I started this one probably in like March or even February with all these good intentions, but it was just not one that I could just listen to consecutively. I even had a hard time listening to half an hour at a time. I speeded this one up to like almost twice the speed to help. The narrator didn't do a bad job, but this is definitely more of a non-fiction read, and it's basically like the author talking about mankind from like the beginning on, and I just wasn't prepared for that, and it just wasn't what I was wanting. A physical read is a bit more fun because it has illustrations of everything from like Pompeii to the dinosaurs. I mean, it covers everything. So I don't really know how to rate this one just because of how old it is and the subject of it. It has been updated with more of our history since it was written. What I found the most interesting about this book was the last like 45 minutes, because the author talks about writing it, and he also talks about even like Hitler and his opinions on Hitler and how he saw things going badly. Like, this was written before bad things happen, and it was like he knew, and it was very impressive. But he talks about how you should take this with a grain of salt because his own opinions and life experience are going to influence the way that he writes it. He's like, for example, someone that grew up, you know, going to the beaches in the summer and on vacation, who really enjoyed that, is going to talk about certain areas that are more ocean and beach filled differently than he will, where he grew up more like in the desert, in the sand, in hot areas, so he doesn't like that. And so his, you know, the writing is a little bit skewed, or like how they feel about certain historical characters. So he says to take all that with a grain of salt, which I really appreciated, because that's what you should do with any writing, because the writing is always skewed by the author who writes it and their opinions on things. And that's why you should read all different kinds of books, because you don't want to just hone in on one style of opinion or style of writing. So that part was really cool and really interesting. And overall, I think it was good. It'd probably be really good for like homeschooling. Don't plan on ever reading or listening to it again. I wound up giving it like 3.5 stars purely because I did think it was written well, especially for the time period, and I really liked that last portion of it. But on to the next Newbery Award, which is much shorter. Then I read Morningstar by Pierce Brown, narrated by Gerard, Reynolds. This might have been my favorite audiobook of the month. So this is part of the Red Rising series. It's book 3. I have been raving about this series for most of this year now. I finally got to this 3rd book. So there are more books in this series, but technically this trilogy is complete after this book, and then the next book, Iron Gold, is set like 20 years in the future after the effects. So we're still getting a lot of our same characters in that book, but it's, you know, in the future after the effects of things that have ended here. So Red Rising is a adult sci-fi dystopian goodness series. It's got Hunger Games vibes. It is set on mostly on Mars and in space, but the first book does not have that many sci-fi elements. It talks a lot about different classes, like we are all segregated by colors, and there's reds and golds, and the colors that you are determines the life that you have and the control that you have and the power that you have. And so it's kind of like one of those overcoming the system type of things. And there is just a ragtag cast in here, and it's just written so well. This is one of the most well-written series I've ever read. This made up for me how terrible Game of Thrones, the TV show, ended, because this ended absolutely beautifully in my opinion, like just the right amount of like drama and death, but not complete depressing hopelessness. And it was amazing, and it made me almost cry. I literally, this entire time I'm reading this entire trilogy, I kept coming around the corner looking at my husband and being like, oh my god, this happened, it's so smart, this is crazy, I didn't expect this, oh my gosh, this is genius. And I was like laughing. Our narrator is one of my all-time favorite narrators now. I hope he can do other things as well. He was amazing. He would go from having like an Irish accent to being like a total Valley Girl American. I was so impressed because our lead character Darrow has kind of more of like that Irish accent, and he would go from talking like Darrow, and then he would go to literally like an American girl that'd be like, Darrow, come on, we need to get out of this. And it was just amazing to listen to. It was such a good production for one narrator to do. I just love these big casts of characters, and there's like fighting and romance and love and mystery, and 5 stars. I like this one as much as I liked the first one. The middle one was probably my least favorite, but I still absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait to continue on with the series. One of my new favorite ones. Yay! Next, I listened to Austenland by Shannon Hale, narrated by Katherine Kellgren, who narrated something else that I really liked, and I cannot remember what it was. But, okay, this is my first Shannon Hale book. This is an adult book, contemporary technically. Our lead character is completely obsessed with Pride and Prejudice and Mr. Darcy, and her great aunt finds out about it. Everyone gives her a hard time about it, and like just worries about her because she's in her 30s and she's not married. She keeps having bad relationships, but she's like won't let go of this like Mr. Darcy fantasy. Her great aunt passes away and gives her in her will a trip to Austenland, which basically is set in the time period of when Jane Austen was alive, and it's this Regency era, and you have to go and you dress up, you can't have your cell phone, and you do all of the things that you would in that time period, and they assign actors to romance you, and you go on carriage rides, and you knit, and you do all this amazing stuff. And she doesn't really want to go because she's kind of freaked out about it, but decides to go and get this Jane Austen fix out of her system. So she decides to go and like really go for it and just let go of all this like Mr. Darcy obsession, and just shenanigans and things happen. And I loved this so much. It was so good. I listened to it in like one day. It's like a 7.5-hour audiobook, so it took me like, I don't know, 4 hours. I just did yard work and cleaning, and I just was completely obsessed with it. I loved it so much. It was amazing. It was just like everything you want in like that chick flicky rom-com novel. It was just so fun. Like this was such a great like contemporary read, and I just enjoyed the world, and it was like a nice twist. You're like in Jane Austen's world, but like not, because you know she's making jokes about cell phones and stuff, and she's such a spunky main character, and she's in her 30s, so it's great. And I thought it was really appropriate for young adults honestly as well, but I so enjoyed this one, and I wound up giving it 4.5 stars. Also, I watched the movie yesterday, which wasn't quite as good as I wanted, but was still pretty dang close. So next I listened to Midnight in Austenland, narrated by Stina Nielson, which is again set in Austenland with a different lead character, and this character is a mom in her mid-30s that's getting divorced, and she winds up going to Austenland to kind of like shake things up and get out of her head. And this one was really cool because it was very different than the first one, but still just as good, and it had a murder mystery aspect kind of set in, you know, in that time period, and there was this big like murder mystery that you had to solve, which I don't really love murder mysteries, but maybe I do because I adored this. It was definitely like lighthearted and fun and like just the right amount of intense and cute and spooky and romantic, and I almost like this one better because of that aspect. I liked our lead character almost more as well, and had a lot about like divorce and kids and things like that, which I don't normally like, but this was done like perfectly, just perfectly with all that stuff. It was so good, so good. I'm so glad I'm finding adult contemporary books that I really, really liked. So I wound up giving this one 4 stars as well. So then for the reading rush, I listened to The School for Good and Evil book 1 and book 2. I only have book 2 here, so this is what I'm going to be holding up. So these are by Simone Shinani. These are narrated by Polly Lee. Again, this is a middle grade series, a little bit more of a hefty one. So the premise of this is there are 2 girls. They live in this small like woodland type town, and there is this rumor slash mythical thing that happens where kids are stolen at the age of 12, 1 or 2, and they are sent to the School for Good or the School for Evil, and nobody can catch the person that's doing it. No one knows why it's happening. No one knows who they're going to pick, and our lead characters are, one is convinced that she's going to the School for Good, and the other one wants nothing to do with it but is friends with her. And our lead character is pretty and fun and vain, and she thinks she's very, very good and pure and princessy, and our other character is kind of snarky and not so pretty, and she likes like being dirty and like playing in the mud and being negative and all that kind of stuff, and so they're kind of an unlikely friendship. But our lead character Sophie thinks that that makes her, you know, very good for being friends with Agatha. And so on the night that things normally happen, things go awry and girls wind up going not where they think they're going. And so we learn about the School for Good and the School for Evil, and there are princes and princesses and magic and lessons about being good and about being evil, and the lines in between, and how things might not seem the way they are, and witches and drama and school teachers, and just, oh, it's so good. I feel like for the Harry Potter lovers, especially the younger kids, this is such a great series. It does slightly have that, you know, younger middle grade feel about it. I just love a good story. It doesn't really matter to me whether it's middle grade or not, unless it's like overly juvenile, which means they're kind of catering to that group. And this one does have like those really silly moments, but I thought it was just so well written and so much fun. If you love fairy tales and magic and school settings, you're gonna love this. I'm listening to book 3 right now, and I just love it. They're very long though. They're like almost 20-hour audiobooks, and they're like over 400-page books, so really good hefty books. Absolutely love it. I think it's totally genius, and I am giving both of these like 4.5 to 5 stars because I listen to them so fast and I love them. And the last book that I listened to was Bone Gap by Laura Ruby, narrated by Dan Bitner. I just randomly picked this one, and I don't remember why. I think because it had a bee on the cover, and I'm really into gardening right now, and I've been like talking to the bees. And it was one of those books that I just wanted to get off of my TBR because I don't know anything about it. I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but it's still kind of popular at the same time, and it's just a standalone, and it was a really quick audiobook to squeeze in at the end of the month. I really like Dan Bitner. He narrates Renegades and Arch Enemies with Rebecca Solar, which I really enjoyed, and also like the Heart of Dread series by Melissa De La Cruz. So this one is actually set in the small town of Bone Gap, which was awesome. It's like a farming town, and 2 main characters, Finn and Sean O'Sullivan, their mom basically left them once the older boy was of an older age to go like off and marry somebody else, and they left them to take care of like their land and their farm and all that kind of stuff. And they one day in their shed, they discovered this Polish girl named Rosa, I think she was Polish, and they basically tell her that she can stay as long as she wants, and she winds up cooking for them and kind of taking care of them and teaching them how to garden, which was awesome because I'm so into gardening, so it was so fun. They talk a lot about plants and dirt and things like that. And then she gets taken from them, and Finn is convinced that something went awry while everyone else thinks that she just ran away, because she did randomly appear one day in the small town and everybody kind of fell in love with her. And so he's kind of determined to find her, and you're getting two perspectives. You're getting Finn's perspective of things that are happening, and then Rosa's, and she's taken by this like super creepy guy, and there's this like magical, somewhat magical surrealism element to it. Finn is also starting to fall in love with this new girl in town. He also gets made fun of a lot for being really different and really quiet and very strange. And it was just unlike anything I've ever read, and I absolutely adored it. It covered some really hard topics. There's some topics about like abuse and things in here as well, but they were very mild and very well done. It was like perfectly done, and there was just enough magic in there. And like, I love the small town vibes. They talk about like cows and goats and all that kind of fun stuff, and you get this like almost quantum physics vibe from this, which I really like, where we're like basically in like a different time, and it was just so mysterious. And I don't know, it was just one of those books that you could read in a day because you don't want to put it down, because you have to know what happened to Rosa and everything that's going to happen, and you really fall in love with the characters, like every single one of them. They have fun names for even like the annoying characters. They have this group of boys that make fun of Finn, and they call them the Rude Boys, and I just, I don't know, I understand why everyone loves this one so much, and I wound up giving it 5 stars. So, sorry for this super long video. That's just what happens when you listen to a ton of audiobooks. As you can see, I enjoyed most of them a ridiculous amount. There were only a couple that I didn't really like that much, and that is awesome out of 11 audiobooks. And I got some things off my list that I've been wanting to read for forever. So excited about that. I hope that I'm gonna have a pretty close to the same amount read in August, because why not? And I really enjoyed them. So let me know if you guys listen to anything that you really loved in August, with good narrators and good stories, and they're like fast-paced. They can even be longer, because that doesn't bother me either anymore. Let me know if you guys like audiobooks. Have you ever listened to an audiobook? Have I convinced you yet? I really want to know down below in the comments. So thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you're having a great August reading month so far, and I'll see you guys next time on the bright side. Bye!